Hi, I hope my screen is visible now.
Yes, Mr. Mathur, it is.
Thank you so much, and welcome again to which is basically how do we influence people to get results for ourselves. Now, this is it's a subject that's it's a little bit subjective, but it's important to understand that that ability and that capability lies within us as individuals, and the opportunity lies with us to be able to understand it well and then use it effectively to influence not only those who work for us, but also people on whom our success depends. That may be around that may be at the same level in different departments on whom we depend, as much as it is about people at senior levels who could have a significant impact on our results if we are not able to influence their approach and their attitude towards what we want to do with them. And it's a soft skill, but it's a really important skill in today's world. I find a lot of people, especially in middle management, actually come back saying it's so hard to work with new generation people, younger people. It's so difficult to get them to do anything. It's so difficult to get them to stay in a job for a long time. They're so distracted. It's very hard for us to get results. And I think it's really all a question of how we are able to understand clearly who they are, more importantly, who we are, and what are the resources that are available to us to influence, their behaviors towards the way that we would like them to behave. Now, there are four levers that one would use, or one could use in this kind of a situation. I think communicating as a leader is one of the key areas that one needs to look at. Now, when it comes to communication, unfortunately, it's not simply a case of one size fits all. We really need to communicate differently with different sets of people, with different groups of people, and with different individuals by clearly understanding their styles and our own styles of functioning. And we will be discussing some of that, as we go forward. We'll also talk considerably about influencing for excellence, using techniques that are more participative, of people, or at times that are more directive to people, depending on what their styles may be and what our styles may be. So we'll discuss that. I think one of the things that we often, as individuals, managers, or leaders, tend to ignore or perhaps not be aware of, and I think the latter is more likely, is that there are different kinds of power that we may possess. There are some that are circumstantial, based upon our own position in an organization or level in an organization. Some of them are softer that we need to look at deep inside, and to be able to use them to influence people. And these are things like knowledge, things like experience, and so on. So how do we sort of use this power, combine it with our style, and influence people? That's the third area that we'd like to look at. I'm not going to dwell a great deal on understanding teams and functioning and dynamics, because I think we keep it focused to how we're going to influence key individuals. That pretty much sums up 80% of what results we're going to get. But having said that, since this is a fourth and important pillar, I will address it in a form of how do we involve teams and how do we align teams to get to influence the direction that they take. So these are the key levers that constitute how we can influence other people to get results for ourselves in the areas that we want results. Communication is really an art. It's what you say, it's how you say it. It reflects how you're thinking. It reflects how you're acting and what you intend to act on. It also reflects, in many ways, a persona, which creates the gravitas of an individual. Gravitas is a term that's being used increasingly to describe people who can create a kind of magnetism where by the power of their other or by the power of these four things. In other words, the quality of the thinking that goes behind the communication, the quality of the words that goes behind the communication, the quality of the actions that are being conveyed in the communication, and the quality of the communication itself in words and in modulation in the way people speak, create that gravitas and that pull, which somehow makes people do things for us that they would not do for us otherwise if we didn't demonstrate that gravitas. That's the reason why this line underneath, which is attributed to George Bernard Shaw, is so important. And the line says, so many times we get, we get really, we can't figure out why, even though we have made a beautifully worded communication and shared it with a number of people over a number of times through a number of channels like email or company meetings or team meetings and so on, that we still don't seem to get the message across to people that we want them to carry, because of which they will do because of which they will be influenced to do things in the direction that we would like to do them. And that line simply is this: the biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Communication doesn't take place simply because you're saying something. Here's a very interesting thing I heard from a CEO of an IT company talking about his communication of the company's strategy for a given year to to all to the entire staff of the company. And he said this very interesting thing. He said that, unfortunately, when you're talking to people about your strategy, only 50% of the people in the room are even listening to what you said. And out of those 50% of the people, only 50% actually understand what you're saying. Out of that 50%, only half of them actually go and do something about what you said. And of the people that have done something about what you said, only half of them really care. The rest of them are only doing it because it's their job. And so the greatest challenge in communication lies in how do you engage people, by putting these four elements in place. Namely, again, I'll repeat them. What's the thinking that's gone behind it? What are the words that you're using? What's the actual action that's either supporting what you're saying or is going to be, is going to be done to build credibility around what you're saying? And how do you appear to the people? Do you appear like you own what you're saying, like you have a great deal of commitment and conviction and a great deal of courage behind what you're saying? So communication isn't as simple as simple a thing as writing something or saying it accurately. It's got to hit at the heart and mind of the people who are listening to us. Now, that means you need to understand who you're talking to. There's not much point talking about very high-level things to to people who are workmen or people who are going to do things with their hands. At the same time, it's not much point talking about very tactical, action-oriented things to people who are involved in driving who are driving a plan. We use two, poles, if you might say, to look at that. One is assertiveness, and the other one is responsiveness. The word assertive really means what's the degree to which the behavior of a person is seen as forceful or directive. Responsive, on the other hand, means what's the degree to which people are seen showing emotions or demonstrating sensitivity. Now, you can draw a matrix on this, and when you're talking to a set of people or to an individual in particular, you can start looking at where do you want to place the individual. Are they, more assertive, less responsive kind of people? In other words, they are people who don't sort of brook any discussion. They say what needs to be done, and then that's got to be done. Do they fall in the bracket that's on the right bottom, which is more assertive and more responsive? Yes, they're responsive. They listen, they talk, they show emotion, but will still ensure that what they're saying gets done. Are they in the left top box, or left top quadrant, which is less assertive and less responsive? They're just waiting for you to tell them what to do, and they will just go out and do it. Or are they sitting in the fourth quadrant, which is the left bottom, which is less assertive, more responsive. These are the kind of people who will keep talking about emotion or involvement and so on and so forth. But when it actually gets down to getting people to do something, they are found wanting in that kind of communication. This kind of segmentation helps us to see not only where the other person is, but also where we are, and then to try and understand what are the kind of likely outcomes if we keep following our style. Now the thing is, none of these styles are good or bad. We just need to keep jumping from one to the other. Firstly, by becoming aware of them, and secondly, by understanding where does the other person we are talking to fall in this in this bracket. And that has a lot to do with what's the level in the organization, what's the conversation you're having, what's the emotional state of the person that you're speaking to, and therefore you can then modulate your communication accordingly. Now, when you look at this quadrant, you can give each of those quadrants a name. Someone who controls and tells more, in other words, is less responsive and more assertive, is what we call a driving style. They are the drivers. People who are more assertive and more responsive are what we call the expressive style. People who are more responsive, less assertive, is what we call the amiable style or the friendly style. And people who are less responsive and less assertive is what we call the analytical style. Now, these are all terms. Let me get into what each of these terms, actually means in terms of behavioral styles, and what happens when you overdo it, and what happens when you, when you underdo it. The reason I'm saying this is because, keep in mind the fact that I said none of these styles is good or bad. They are just 4 styles. And to be effective in the way we communicate, we need to understand these better, because in a conversation, we may need to jump from one style to the other at various points in time, depending again on power, position, authority, emotion, and the situation that the situation in which we are having a discussion with somebody. So let's have a look at each of these styles. Let's look at the drivers. What are the typical characteristics of a driver? This could be you as a driver. This could be the person that you're talking to as a driver. And therefore, the communication that you have with a driver or as a driver would require us to understand what are the characteristics, what happens when it's used well, what happens when it gets overused. So not surprisingly, many of us are familiar with drivers because we communicate a great deal with the leaders in our organizations, or at least we hear them very frequently, so what they're saying and what they want. And to a large extent, leaders tend to demonstrate the characteristics of drivers more often than not. They're very focused on results. They don't mince any words. They come very direct. They don't have a lot of time for everybody. They come across as people who are very convinced about what they are saying. They show a great deal of energy behind it. There's not much they will show with respect to acknowledging effort. They are mostly people who are interested in whether you're getting results or not. So they're very, very goal oriented, and they want they want people to take action on whatever they say. These people very often will tend to give you the impression that they are hard as nuts on the outside and that there's not an iota of softness inside, but that's not true. That's usually just their their tendency to hide feelings from other people. As they do that, they also expect that other people are just like them, and so they will often not they will often not acknowledge the softer side of other people. They only want to have a hard conversation, and that often tends to intimidate people a great deal. There's also one of the other characteristics. It's not just about strong eye contact. It's also about body language. It's very outgoing. It's very extrovertish. It's very direct. It's in your face. and it's cut and dry kind of stuff very often. These are some of the characteristics that that you could say are things that would be indicative of a driver style. Now, this is good when it's used well, and when it's used well, it can result in some pretty interesting or rather very outcome-oriented results or outcome-oriented kind of behaviors, because these are people whose tendency is to move things from point A to point B all the time. They don't like things that are stationary. They will make things happen. They will drive things to a point where you get results. There's also a great deal of and these could be people anywhere in the organization. You'll find the driver type people are people that require less and less input, and they will they will show more and more action. I'm not saying results. I'm saying action, because they tend to be very they tend to be very independent. They require less management than many of the other people do. They tend to be oriented towards results and very, very straight and direct and pragmatic. They're the type that will be looking at a practical discussion. Now, you don't want to get into a situation where you have a driver type person who's sitting across you as a direct devotee of yours or as a colleague of yours, and you attempt to start getting into things like intention and kindness and consideration, those kinds of conversations, because those are people, if you have that kind of conversation, they'll switch off very, very quickly. So you'll immediately need to switch to say, aha, I have a driver kind of person sitting in front of me. They're more interested in listening to logic. They're more interested in listening to action. They're more interested in listening to to results-oriented stuff. Therefore, if I want to influence this person to do something for me, I want them to walk away from this room saying, I like the logic, I like the urgency, I like the directness, I think I'd like to work with this person, as opposed to walking out of your room saying, oh, come on, that's a lot of fluff this person is talking about, and I don't think how long it's going to take to get this stuff done, and so let me chart my independent path as opposed to working along with this person. So, if it's used well, you can significantly enhance your ability to influence what driver type of personalities will do when they're working with you. They could be anywhere in the organization. They could be a direct report. They could be a peer. They could be somebody who's who's below your level but in another department. They could be a manager, or they could be a leader. They could be anywhere. So what I'm trying to make is, when you have that conversation, keep that in mind and tune your conversation towards that area. Unfortunately, when the driver type characteristics get overused, they can appear to be, my way or the highway kind of conversations. They can often manifest themselves or reveal themselves in a way where the person appears to be not interested in teamwork, and they will do the work, by themselves. It often appears to be I, me, and myself, and there's nobody else involved in this. One of the negative outcomes of this is that these people often will get branded as being rude and as being people who are only interested in what's going on right now and not interested in the longer term in the longer term issue. Now, what happens when you face something like this? You're probably facing something like this and making those assessments because you are not sitting, or your communication is not sitting in the driver box. And that's when these things can become a challenge. This is a great time for you to move away from one of the other boxes and start having a driver box type discussion. And that's that's where the influence starts coming in. So let's not stereotype people. Let's understand where they are and why we are seeing what we're seeing, and then adjust our role as a leader, or as a peer, or as a manager, or as a colleague, to have that conversation in the space that the other party is comfortable in. Let me move to a second characteristic. This characteristic is what we call expressive, and some of the things that you're likely to see very often in the expressive space of people who are more expressive is um, they tend to be, people who would like to be the center of attraction. They will speak a lot at meetings. They will have a point of view on everything. They will tend to sort of be very, very communicative and participative in groups. You will also largely find them in groups. It's unlikely that you're going to find an expressive person who's all by himself, is self-driven and is running by himself. These people get their energy from other groups, and they get their energy from being able to express and say what they want to in those groups. Of course, they tend to be people that you can work with because they will listen. They are willing to admit other points of view. They're willing to have a discussion on those. They're very accommodative in any kind of a group. They tend to be people who will work easily with others. They don't really care if they are with people that they know very well. They're perfectly fine with environments that are unfamiliar to them, with people who are unfamiliar to them, with perspectives and points of view that are unfamiliar to them. They're just fine with that. But they do have very strong opinions. And they will tend to share their opinion and share it extensively with a lot of people. Now, here's a challenge often that happens with people who are very expressive. They're so busy working on their thoughts and working on their communication that they often find that they don't have time to get things done at the time when they tend to be done. I found some of the most expressive people, and you can find them. It's not hard to find them. They will be working on things at the last minute. These are the guys who suddenly wake up at 5 in the evening to start building a presentation and start doing research on that when they have to make that presentation at 9 in the morning tomorrow. These are also the kind of people. Another way you can find them very easily is when you walk around the office. If you see a desk on which you see a lot of stuff lying around, right? Lots of books, lots of papers, lots of inter-office memos. You'll find these are people, when you send them emails, they will tend to respond about all sorts of things, but it's not easy to get them to make a decision till the last minute. You will see people like this around you at a peer level or virtually any level, even at managerial and leadership level. It's easy to identify expressive people because they're so open and so visible in everything that they do. When expressiveness gets used well, you seldom find things getting stuck for ideas, things getting stuck for thoughts, because these things will happen very spontaneously, and not only will they happen very spontaneously, they'll probably be explained very clearly also, because people who are expressive tend to be quite articulate about the things that they're doing. So you find discussions, conversations, again I'm saying not necessarily action, but you'll find conversations, discussions, those kinds of things being relatively faster than if you're working with a set of people who are very deliberate, who are action oriented and are getting fed up with no action getting identified in the discussion, or the discussions getting stuck, as compared with expressive people. Because of their nature, because of being very articulate and not feeling afraid to share what they want to share, you'll find that many of the conversations are visionary as opposed to action oriented. Needless to say, group dynamics tend to be a lot more fun, and so you'll often find that these are people who like to have a lot of fun. Again, another way of identifying them. These are people who will never miss your office party. These are the people who will be making plans all the time with all sorts of people of what are we going to do on Friday night. They'll be talking about movies and that have just been released. They'll be talking about all kinds of things, and it's easy to find them. It's also very easy to use these people as magnets to attract other people. Now, this could be used effectively in influencing group dynamics. A lot of people will often follow fun-loving, people who sort of hold center stage and get a lot of things moving in a comfortable kind of an environment, as opposed to drivers who will tend to make environments fairly uncomfortable. So it's up to us as leaders and managers to bring in some element of the action-orientedness while working with the visionaries, or rather with the expressive people, and to use them as or rather leverage them as the magnets to get people to start driving there. Imagine what you could do if you had a really big idea with with a result that you wanted to get out there, and you get together with an expressive sort of a person, and you're able to successfully sell the idea by being expressive yourself with this person. At the same time, getting some of the driver elements into the conversation, saying, but while this is a really this is a great goal, this is what we need to achieve. You will have these people creating that momentum in the organization for you. So it's really a question of how to leverage the expressive people in the organization to drive some of the influence, if that influence has to be driven in larger groups. However, when it gets overused, the problems are typical with those who speak a great deal and those who engage a great deal in conversation with stuff. They're hard to work with because they're not even listening to what you're saying, right? And that becomes a problem. They become really impatient when you start talking because that's their position in the system. You will often find that this is a group of people that are so convinced about what they are saying because they have built a really great story around the core issue, that they will sometimes tend to be totally impractical about the ability to achieve something. These are people who, you say, I'm going to grow 50%, next year in revenue in a market that's growing 6 or 7%. These people are quite capable, let me tell you, of building a great story about how that 50% can be achieved. And then they'll come and tell you that story and be totally, unwilling to listen to you about how impractical that is because they've just sold that story so well to themselves. They can often end up being very distracting, especially if you've got a lot of analytical people who depend more on data and information than on anecdotal stuff that these guys are strong at. Or you've got driver type of personalities who have little time for talk. They're more interested in action, so they could end up being quite distracting. And I think the way to deal with that is is once again to look at which box you want to deal with these people from. It's usually a combination of analytical, so you start breaking down the conversation based on facts, and driver, so you help these people, first of all, base their ideas on analytical type of thinking, and then base their action on result-oriented kind of thinking. So expressive people are great to have around, but you've just got to be able to leverage their skills in different ways. Let's look at the third category, which is the amiables. These are the people who are very friendly, who are very supportive, and so on. They tend to be seen as, or rather, let me put it this way: these are people who will often be the ones who will be the first to say yes to anything that you take out. Great way of identifying is these are the guys who never say no. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. They just say yes to a lot of things. There's nothing wrong with that. I think there are advantages to that. But let's have a look at the characteristics first. They're the easiest to influence, to play along with the team. And if you want to create momentum in a team where you want to drive influence towards something, these are the people to look for creating that momentum, or having more people who are supporting the issue. They will be very willing to listen into whatever the drivers are saying. They're also very willing to listen to what the expressives are saying. They're also very willing to listen to what what the analytical people are saying. So they will encourage people to encourage people to add to an opinion that they may have shared. And so it's a great place to start seeding some thoughts and throwing those thoughts out so that the analytical people can come in and give it some heft on the analytical side. And the driver people can come in and put some action orientedness towards what it is. It usually makes for great conversations that build from bottoms up. These are people who are quite open to opinion. They're not hell-bent on only saying I'm not interested in anybody's opinion. I only want results and action. Nor are they the types who say my opinion is the only one that matters, and please listen because I have the best opinion. They tend to be quite friendly, and they are they will at least outwardly be very they'll be very sensitive to other people. They tend to be supportive. They tend, when this uh, when this group of people or an individual of this type is in your team or as part of a discussion that you're having where you want to drive some influence and it's used well, these will be people who will support your point of view. And these will be people who will also support the point of view of other people. So it can bring in a great deal of balance into the conversations that you have. They will have balanced conversations anyway, or they'll be open to balanced conversations, and it's best to leverage them for creating balance in the conversations that we have. If this kind of style, the amiable style, is overused, some of the downsides clearly are, they will not take up the hard stuff. If there's a hard issue that needs to be discussed here and now that involves people in the room who've done something that they shouldn't have, or something like that, those conversations will normally get missed out. These are also people on the downside who will accept a suboptimal result. If you said, the goal for the organization is to do da 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 da, and the number we're looking at is 10% growth or 20% growth, they will be permissive enough to say, oh, we said 20%, we achieved 16, that's not too bad. So on the downside, that's sometimes a challenge that comes up, and they will often not be accountable to the tasks that they've taken up because they expect other people in a conversation with you, for instance, they'll expect you to be lenient. They'll expect you to take their point of view on board. They will expect you to understand why something wasn't done. And so if you're, if you're sitting and having a conversation with a person like this that needs to be influenced, your tango starts again. It's usually good to give them a little bit, and so you play a part to get them on board and make them comfortable by being an amiable yourself to begin with, and then start moving your, start getting to a tango to more specific stuff. Because let's not forget that these people are open to specific stuff as well, and that's when you get into a driver mode and start, start putting an expectation forward, and maybe you'll need to get back into amiable mode and listen to them, and then go back into driver mode and play that tango till you get to a point where the amiable is amiable to your, to what you want to, what you want to drive. The fourth type is the analytical characteristics, or rather the analytical type. The characteristics you would have on an amiable, on an analytical type are that these people tend to be, if it's, so they will tend to set difficult goals, and then they will tend to fret when they don't achieve it. And they will, even if you achieve them in a different way, they are not satisfied because they didn't achieve them in the way that they said it should be achieved. So they tend to be perfectionists. They tend to be, they tend to set very high goals and to achieve standards that are difficult to achieve otherwise. They will also tend to be the people, when you walk into their offices, there's not a lot of stuff lying around. There's, work gets done yesterday evening, everything is cleared out yesterday evening. Tomorrow morning or today morning is a fresh day altogether. Everything will be, if you want to find them in the organization, all their planning will be on a calendar. Every meeting that they're going to be will be on that calendar. Everybody who needs to be invited is on the calendar. Anything that those people need to prepare for has been sent 2 days in advance. Those are the kind of things that you'll tend to find with people who tend to be analytical. It's easy to find them in a meeting also, because all the conversation for them is beginning in a spreadsheet, or it's beginning in some kind of a plan document. All action, everything that needs to be done is being looked at from that point of view. Every action is documented, a date is put against it. You know the type. I mean, you would have met many of these people. In fact, many of us on this group would probably belong to this category as well. And this, when you want to bring logic into influence, I think this is a beautiful category to be sitting in, because they will bring logic, they will bring method, they will bring systems and processes, into the game. So now think about it. If you are struggling between people who are amiable and people who are drivers in a group in which you're discussing, this is a great place to go into to get the drivers to step back a little and say, whatever action you're taking needs to be based on some logic, and needs to be needs to be part of a system that involves everybody. And it's a great box to go into with the amiables. The amiables will go this way or that. If somebody says something very strongly, the amiables will agree and be supportive to that. And so a great place to be is analytical and drive the amiables in that direction too. By virtue of using logic, and by virtue of being methodical and putting method into two very different kinds of people, the drivers and the amiables, who have their respective strengths, but those strengths are not based on method. So your tango could begin by you going into the analytical box and having that discussion, and then depending on who you're trying to influence, to get into their box to further cement that influence. However, if it gets overused, then I'm sure you've heard the term, analysis paralysis. If you have people in the organization, in your organization, who are inflicted by analysis paralysis, they keep on analyzing. They come to a conclusion and say, here's what we are going to do as an action, and then they sit down and pull out two spreadsheets on what could happen if that action is if that action fails, and if that action is only half achieved, or if that action is not achieved. They will keep on analyzing and never get to get to the next level. The analytical group will also often be extremely impersonal. They just tend to be and very bureaucratic. They just tend to be very fact-based, very process-based. If the process isn't working, it doesn't matter. You still got to put it through a process. So what happens when you're faced with in a conversation where you want to influence a person who's analytical by nature into being more of a driver type. This is a time where you use the analytical box to get into a comfort situation in the conversation with them, and then start putting some of the attributes of a driver to drive that towards a more specific outcome. So those are really the four types of personalities. It's important to understand these, like I said earlier, because when you're having a conversation or you're communicating with these kinds of people, it's not something that's going to happen by taking the same conversation to everybody in the system. Now, when we live in an organizational environment, there is always stress. And many times the conversations we are having or the communication we're sending out to people is based on some kind of stress that we're dealing with. So it's good to understand what are the characteristics of all the four types of personalities that you're likely to run into. But it's also important to understand what's going to happen when one of these personalities is experiencing stress. So how do you deal with that? The typical reactions that you're going to get from from drivers when stress is at a high level is that they'll become more and more autocratic. They're going to become tougher and tougher, and they'll say, no, this is the way you got to do it, go do it. when you look at at analytical people, when they stress, they'll start they'll tend to be more avoiding. They'll start avoiding the kind of things that are causing that stress. When you look at expressive people, when there's stress and there's bad news flowing around, they will put the bad news at the center of their communication, and they'll start attacking anyone or anything that they believe is responsible for causing that stress. And then when you come to the amiable people, they're probably just going to succumb to the stress and say, well, if this is what it is, then this is how we'll respond to it. So if they are faced at that point in time with an autocratic response of a driver, they'll just acquiesce to that autocratic behavior and do what the person is saying. If they are faced with an expressive person who's attacking, well, they just acquiesce to the attack and say, yep, you're right, I think you're the reason, or our department is the reason for all of this stuff. And if they are faced with an analytical person who's avoiding the issue, they will say, yeah, what do we do? I guess the best thing to do at this point in time is to ignore the problem, and we hope that it will just go away. Now, how does this translate into behaviors? So how do backup styles translate into behaviors? The avoiding types, the analytical people will start avoiding any confrontation. They'll try and deflect the issue to wherever they can by using data, by using information, by using, by talking about process. Where is the process? Where did it fail? What's the FMEA of this process? They'll go into areas like that. When you look at the autocratic people, they'll just confront others and say, we want things to be done in this, in this kind of way. They get over logical, over rational. All emotion goes out of the window, and they just want action and results and nothing else. Kind of behaviors you're likely to see from the amiables is forget the issue, right? Let's start smoothing the ruffled feathers. Let's not confront anybody. Let's just agree with what people are saying. One of the downsides is that if they've been supporting you in the past and there's a great deal of pressure, they are more likely than others to withdraw support for what you might have been saying earlier, and they become oriented towards let's not make a decision and hesitate over everything. Expressive people will tend to start confronting people. They'll start getting judgmental, and not only will they get judgmental personally, they'll also start voicing that what their judgments are about other people to others. They will start getting, these are the people who are the first ones to start pointing fingers at others and attributing, attributing failures to people or to individuals, and become very animated often in the discussions that they have. Now, as a leader, you've got to deal with all this stuff, and I found a very nice comment here. It says that leadership is not defined by the exercise of power. You cannot use power all the time in power as in hierarchical power. But leadership is defined more by the capacity to increase the sense of power amongst those led. How do you increase, the sense of power? And I'll come to what kind of power I'm talking about amongst the people that you're leading, right? Because the core job of a leader is to create more leaders around him. So let's look at power for a little bit. We spoke about it early on. What's the kind of power that we want to wield, and what's the kind of power that's at our command? Right? Power is really the ability of influencing the behavior of other people. That's what it's all about at a high level. And there are really two kinds of power. One is that comes from the position that you hold. You're higher up in the hierarchy, or you have more experience than other people in the system, or you know the subject matter better, or you are the incumbent and there's a new joinee. It's simply a question of what's the position that you hold. The other power is more personal in nature, which is driven by relationships. So you can have power by position, which is the hard kind of power, and you can have personal kind of power, which is driven by relationships. And let me add to that, relationships and knowledge. if you look at positional power, it's typically from these four areas. Right? I have more information. You must have heard the term very often in organizations where they say information is power. This is what it really means. Somebody who has more information in the organization will wield power of a certain kind that you are unable to wield because you are dependent on that information, or that information can be used to influence decisions that then you are unable to influence because of the ability of the other person. The other is coercive. I'm just in a higher position, and therefore I call the shots, and I can decide what kind of power you want, what kind of power I can use on you. The third is on rewards. I pretty much decide what your review is going to look like, what your increment is going to look like, what your bonuses are going to look like, whether you get a promotion or not, and therefore I wield positional power on you. And there's, there is a legitimacy that comes to the individual because it has been invested in him by the organization. So these are the four broad forms of power that you probably see on the positional side. Let's see what kind of power you can wield on the personal side. And this usually comes in from your expertise in a certain area and your ability to be referenced for for various kinds of roles that you might be able to play in the organization or have played in the organization. And therefore, there's a reference value to the personal power that you wield upon people. I think it's important to see how you use this power. And this graphic is really important to understand. It's simply a question of what hat you wear at what point in time. Neither of the two types of power are good or bad. They are both just types of power that are available to us. And so it's really up to us whether we want to use referent or relationship kind of personal power, or we want to use the kind of power that's by position that's invested in us to influence the people we work with. So the whole idea is about using the right kind of power to influence others by first understanding who they are, who we are, and what's the power and personality type that we can use to influence those people. So if it's really important to try and understand your own style. Are you a person who's a pull style? Now, what's pull style? We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll also look at some of the detailing of what's a pull style of influencing. It's typically based on gravitas. How do you become someone that people want to follow for a certain set of attributes that you demonstrate on a regular basis? It could be a personality type. So it could be, because you're very expressive and they love the way you express and speak. It could be because you're a driver and they are basically the follower type of people. And so is that your pull? Is your pull really about being analytical? People love the fact that you're, so well informed in whatever it is that you do. They pull themselves towards you. So it could be a personality type that you could use that you could be strong at using your pull style. Or is it simply about the fact that you are respected greatly for the quality of your thought, for the quality of your communication, the way you talk to people and engage them, the way the actions and the results that you're able to drive, and the way you come across as an individual. It could be any of these things that define pull. Or it could be a push type. Do you normally use a ram the decision down people's throat style, or are you very persuasive because you are expressive and you also have very strong analytical traits? I mean, that's a fantastic strength to influence people. If you're expressive and you use and you're analytical, I think that's a great combination for being extremely influential in the system. So you need to know what your own style of influencing others is, and that's where you start using the power to leverage whatever you have as the strengths on your gravitas and as the strengths on your personality type. So to understand your style, I mean, I just put a few points here so that we become clear about, how do you understand your style? A pull style will typically be represented by people who like to build rapport, people who like to take on other opinions on board by listening to people, not just to listen because it's a good thing to do, but to understand, and then to include that, include that, or take that opinion on board. I think it's equally important to be very, to ask the right kind of questions. Because when you ask the right kind of questions, you get to the heart of the matter. It's not enough to just ask, superficial, surface level questions. It's equally important to dive down till you get to insight. Because when you get insight, that's when things start mattering more and more to people. People will not usually. It's very rare that people will give you insight immediately because you ask a brilliant question. You have to ask open-ended questions that will give you, two or three things to catch, to latch onto, and then on each of those things, then you ask a drill-down question. So you say, how are things going with respect to the cost cutting that we're looking at? You may get an open-ended response that says, we're doing pretty well in some areas, but I think on the manufacturing side there are still some issues. So that's a good time to ask a deep dive question. When you say manufacturing side, what exactly are the issues? And the person may come across and say, in some cases, we are having some issues with one or two of the vendors in the supply chain that are not willing to reduce their costs, and we have a great dependency on those vendors. So the next dive down question could be, so who exactly are those vendors and what specifically are their issues? And then on the issues, you say, how does it show up? And somebody says, oh, because they incur a lot of transportation costs. And then you could go into a dive down question and say, can we support them on the transportation cost in a certain way? What's the way in which we can support them and to what extent? So it's really important to question, so you get to the insights, and then people really come on board because they start seeing you as somebody interested in listening only to the superficial stuff, but is willing to go down to get insights into their challenges, take the issue on board, build the rapport, and then be able to drive the results. You may not find that very appealing because being expressive and being analytical may not be areas that you're strong in. Never mind, that's okay. You might have a push style where you're analytical certainly because your reasoning is very sound and is based on logic. But you might be a person who tends to push, people saying, this is the thing I need to get done. So here you are typically a combination of analytical and driver. So you're very logical reasoning, or you're just driver. You're very logical reasoning, and you can't think beyond, I wouldn't say think beyond. Your thinking is very clear. You say, boss, here's what I want done. If it's not done, there will be punishment, and if it's done, then there will be a reward. And so, how do you leverage that, and what do you need to build up on to really to really get to understand what your style is? Once you've understood the style, you could look at what your pull style strategies could be, or what your push styles. If you're a pull type, if you have a pull style, what could be your strategies to influence? And if you're a push style, what could be your strategies to influence if you're if you're sitting in that bucket? So some of the strategies you could look at from a pull style is, as we discussed earlier, is to really look at how you can use techniques to involve people. One great way is to ask great questions, listen to people, get to insights, be transparent with the way that you communicate, so that it's what you roughly call bridging strategies between the four types of personalities that you might have. Or you could look at, or you could look at, so the bridging part is really squarely in the gravitas side of things. People get pulled towards me because I involve them in my discussions, because I'm interested in what they're doing, and I get to the bottom of it, and I'm very transparent myself, and so that demonstrates my thinking, my behavior, and so on. The other is being, getting so the second one is really about the So when you look at attracting, it's about moving more towards the expressive style, saying people get attracted to me and influenced by me because of the great vision that I'm able to envision and to express. The other is that for that vision and whatever I've expressed, even though the people I'm talking to are different types of people or personality types, I'm finding a common ground to work with them, to attract them towards me. That's what push is. If your style typically is push, instead of being absolutely prescriptive, one great way of looking at it is get more persuasive. Now, if you look at the four personality types that we looked at in persuasive, I think we looked at the combination of expressive and analytical as being fairly persuasive. So rather than prescribing, good strategies would be to propose and then to reason based on fact and maybe experience. The other strategy you could use is to be asserting. So without being intrusive and telling people what needs to be done, you can still use your skills and your strengths to become, to set expectations rather than to prescribe. To be a person who evaluates and therefore appears a more reasonable and a more reasonable and a more logical person to do business with and therefore to influence people. You could still use incentives and pressure. I think that's when you're driving performance in certain situations, things don't work by just influencing. They sometimes have to be pushed down. And that's a skill area that you have. Then it's great to use that area smartly. So we broadly covered a few things here. That we talked about at the top. How do you communicate? What are the type of people that I'm going to have to deal with? How do I wield influence? What are the personality types? How do I move from one box to another when I'm dealing with individuals or with teams to frame my communication in a way that's going to help me influence with power? What are the sources of power that I have and how do I use them? And that's broadly what I had on the content side today. And I am happy to leave this open to questions and answers.